Imagine a king, not forged on the battlefield, but born from a dream. A monarch whose mind was a sprawling canvas, where magnificent castles rose from the mist, where operas played only for him, and whose very existence became a whispered legend, a haunting question mark in the annals of royalty. What if the most beautiful dreams of a king could become the very chains that dragged him into a descent so profound, so utterly bizarre, that even his death remains shrouded in a mystery that defies logic and screams of betrayal? If you're drawn to the phantom echoes of history, where genius skirts the edge of madness and power collides with tragedy, then join this journey into the past. Subscribe, let your insights illuminate the comments below, and tell me where in the world you're unraveling this royal enigma from. Ludwig Otto Friedrich Wilhelm was not born for the rigid demands of Bavarian politics. He was born for the stage of epic myth. From his earliest days, the young prince, grandson of the flamboyant Ludwig I and heir to the Wittelsbach throne, was a creature of intense imagination. He found the austere realities of court life stifling, far preferring the romantic sagas of Lohengrin and Tannhäuser, the heroic tales of medieval knights, and the natural grandeur of the Bavarian Alps. His childhood was a curious blend of aristocratic privilege and profound isolation. Separated from his younger brother Otto by temperament and inclination, Ludwig spent countless hours immersed in books, art, and the melancholic beauty of nature. The expectations of kingship, the incessant diplomacy, the endless state dinners, these were nothing but tiresome distractions from the true calling of his soul, the pursuit of the sublime. His ascension to the throne in 1864, at the tender age of 18, was met with a wave of euphoria across Bavaria. Handsome, tall, and possessed of a captivating charisma, he seemed the very embodiment of a fairy tale king. His subjects adored him. Women across Europe were infatuated, and the rigid Prussian Chancellor Otto von Bismarck saw in him a malleable, artistic soul who would pose no real political threat. But Ludwig's initial popularity masked a profound disinterest in the mundane mechanics of governance. His vision for Bavaria was not one of geopolitical dominance or economic expansion, but of artistic renaissance. He saw himself as a patron, a muse, a living embodiment of the romantic ideals he cherished. His first and most enduring passion was Richard Wagner. Upon hearing Lohengrin, the prince was so captivated that he summoned the controversial composer to Munich, rescuing him from debt and despair. This patronage, however, wasn't just artistic. It was deeply personal, almost spiritual. Ludwig saw in Wagner's operas a reflection of his own yearning for a world of heroes, gods, and tragic love. He poured vast sums of state money into Wagner's projects, built him a villa, and shielded him from critics, causing uproar among his ministers and the Bavarian populace, who viewed Wagner with suspicion and resentment. The king's obsession was not simply an appreciation of music. It was an attempt to manifest his inner world into reality, using Wagner's genius as the blueprint. He didn't just want to hear the music, he wanted to live within it, to become one of its mythical characters. This fusion of artistic fantasy and royal prerogative would set the stage for everything that followed, blurring the lines between kingly duty and personal delusion in a manner unprecedented in European history. The political realities of the late 19th century were harsh, a stark, unwelcome counterpoint to Ludwig's operatic sensibilities. Bavaria, a smaller kingdom with a cherished history of independence, found itself increasingly overshadowed by the rising militaristic might of Prussia. After the calamitous Austro-Prussian War of 1866, in which Bavaria sided with a losing Austria and suffered a decisive defeat, Ludwig was forced into a humiliating alliance with Prussia. This political subjugation, this bitter absorption into a larger, more pragmatic German empire, was a poison for a monarch who dreamed of absolute sovereignty and romantic heroism. He was a king of an era that was rapidly vanishing, compelled to perform duties for a world he disdained. It was during this period of increasing political impotence, of dwindling real power, that Ludwig retreated further into his private world, a realm he sought to materialize through stone and mortar, his fantastical castles. These were not mere buildings, they were fortresses against a reality he could not bear, physical manifestations of his unfulfilled dreams. Neuschwanstein, the most famous of these, is today a global icon of romantic architecture, a breathtaking fairy tale vision visited by millions. But for Ludwig, it was far more than a tourist attraction. It was a deeply personal sanctuary, a meticulously constructed stage set for his inner dramas, where he could be the hero he always envisioned. He envisioned it as a medieval knight's castle, a soaring tribute to the German sagas of Parsifal and Tristan, and above all, to the Wagnerian operas that consumed him, particularly Lohengrin, with its motif of the enigmatic Swan Knight. Every fresco, every tapestry, every intricate carving was meticulously planned to reflect his internal landscape, to bring the mythical realm into tangible existence. The great hall's frescoes depicted scenes from Wagner's operas, casting Ludwig himself in the role of the beleaguered hero, surrounded by the divine and the legendary. Construction began in 1869, draining immense sums from his personal coffers and eventually the Bavarian state budget itself. His obsession was absolute. He meticulously oversaw every detail, often visiting the remote mountain site at night, under the eerie glow of lamps, to avoid curious eyes, a phantom king inspecting his phantom kingdom, already a recluse in the making. Linderhof Palace, a smaller but equally opulent creation nestled in the Alpine valleys, was Ludwig's interpretation of a Rococo pleasure palace, a direct homage to the absolute French kings he so admired, particularly Louis XIV, the Sun King, whose unbridled power he desperately craved for himself. It featured a bewildering Venus grotto, an artificial cave complete with a shimmering waterfall, a golden shell-shaped boat, and electric lighting, an astonishing innovation for its time, designed to recreate the legendary Blue Grotto of Capri for his solitary boat rides. Here, in the dim theatrical light, he would stage private performances of Wagner's operas, sometimes as the sole audience member, lost completely in the illusion, blurring the lines between king, patron, and mythical hero. The dazzling hall of mirrors, echoing Versailles, but for one man's private reflection, the elaborate peacock throne, the extensive theatrical gardens. Linderhof was a monument to luxurious escapism, a retreat where the mundane burdens of kingship could be shed like an unwanted cloak. It was a golden cage he built for himself, exquisite and utterly isolated. His third grand project, Herrenchiemsee Palace, was perhaps the most audacious, the most potent symbol of his magnificent delusion, a full-scale replica of Versailles, built on an isolated island in Lake Chiemsee. It was intended not just as a monument, but as a personal temple to absolute monarchy, a shrine to Louis XIV, whom Ludwig saw as a kindred spirit, an unconstrained monarch creating a world entirely of his own design, unbound by politics or parliament. The sheer scale was breathtaking. The construction of the Hall of Mirrors at Herrenchiemsee, meant to outshine its French prototype, boasted more candles and even grander dimensions, a desperate attempt to physically manifest a supremacy he could not achieve in the real world. Yet, like many of Ludwig's grandest dreams, Herrenchiemsee remained largely unfinished, a towering, melancholic testament to the sheer scale of his ambition and the rapidly dwindling funds available to realize it, a monument to a monarchy already in ruin. These castles were not for public display or statecraft. They were intensely private worlds, built for solitary contemplation and the illusion of absolute rule, a meticulously crafted shell that allowed him to retreat entirely from the unwelcome realities of his reign. He designed special dining mechanisms where meals would be delivered from the floor below, allowing him to dine without seeing his servants, a chilling testament to his burgeoning misanthropy. He slept through the day and lived through the night, traversing his magnificent creations in a dreamlike state, a ghostly figure moving through his stone fantasies. The cost of these architectural fantasies was staggering, quickly outstripping his personal wealth and plunging the Bavarian royal house into monumental debt that threatened the very stability of the kingdom. While his frantic ministers pleaded for fiscal responsibility, for a return to the practical world, Ludwig responded with indignant fervor, famously declaring, "I will build my castles, and if I become bankrupt, I will be a bankrupt king." It was a declaration not of financial ruin, but of a soul utterly consumed by an unshakable vision, a king choosing myth over mundane reality. Consequences be damned. As his fantastical castles rose from the Bavarian Alps, each a testament to a world he wished into being, Ludwig's connection to his subjects and the pressing duties of his office receded further into the mists of his self-imposed isolation. He transformed into a nocturnal recluse, utterly shunning the daylight and the public appearances that were once the lifeblood of monarchical rule. His bewildered ministers, increasingly desperate, found it an almost impossible feat to gain an audience with their sovereign. They were often forced to present urgent state documents to him in the dead of night, sometimes at absurd hours like 3 a.m., or through an elaborate network of trusted intermediaries who understood his peculiar demands for solitude. His personal appearance, once impeccably regale and befitting a young king, grew increasingly eccentric, mirroring the internal chaos that simmered beneath his withdrawn exterior. He gained significant weight, neglected his once fastidious grooming, allowing his beard and hair to grow wild, and began to speak less and less, preferring the silent company of his own thoughts to the superficial niceties of human interaction. The whispers of madness, once confined to hushed tones among nervous courtiers, began to circulate more openly, first filtering through the salons of Munich, then spreading virally through the European press and diplomatic circles, painting a portrait of a king lost not just to his people, but to himself. His closest companions in this meticulously constructed world of illusion became his magnificent horses and the heroic, often tragic characters of his beloved operatic fantasies. He would frequently dress in elaborate, historically accurate costumes, sometimes as a medieval knight, other times as a French king of absolute power, and ride his horses through the moonlit grounds of his palaces, transforming his meticulously crafted landscapes into personal stages for his internal dramas. These were not mere rides. They were solitary, theatrical performances, where he was both actor and audience, fully inhabiting the roles that reality denied him. His famous table set yourself mechanism at Linderhof, a marvel of engineering that allowed his dining table to be lowered to the kitchen below and raised fully laden, perfectly encapsulated his profound desire for absolute privacy. It was a chilling testament to his burgeoning misanthropy, his increasing inability to tolerate the mere presence of other human beings, even his most devoted servants. The rustle of a footman's uniform, the glance of an eye, any reminder of external life was an unbearable intrusion on his private, perfectly controlled universe. This deepening retreat wasn't merely a matter of personal preference. It had profound and increasingly dire implications for the governance of Bavaria. Essential state business languished, critical decisions were endlessly delayed, and the intricate machinery of government began to creak and groan under the immense weight of an absent monarch. While Ludwig indulged his architectural and theatrical whims, the political landscape of Germany was shifting with tectonic force, with unification under Prussian dominance becoming an undeniable, often brutal reality. Bavaria needed a strong, present, and pragmatic leader to navigate these treacherous waters. But instead, it found itself with a king lost entirely in his own elaborate dream world, a phantom ruler in an increasingly material age. The irony was bitter. He sought to escape political subjugation into a world of his own making, only for that world to become the very instrument of his undoing, leaving his kingdom rudderless in a storm. His family, observing this accelerating descent, grew increasingly concerned for the stability of the Wittelsbach dynasty and the very future of Bavaria. His uncle, Prince Luitpold, who would eventually be thrust into the role of regent, tried repeatedly to intervene, as did other prominent members of the royal house. But Ludwig, ever sensitive to criticism and acutely aware of his perceived royal prerogative, rebuffed all attempts to curb his extravagant spending or alter his increasingly isolated lifestyle. He genuinely believed he was merely exercising his divine right as king, pursuing beauty and art as a higher, more noble purpose than mere political administration or fiscal restraint. He saw himself as an enlightened patron, a visionary artist king, rather than a failing monarch plunging his kingdom into ruin. He clung to the conviction that his grand projects were Bavaria's true glory, and that the mundane concerns of budgets and statecraft were beneath his artistic sensibility. The mounting debts, however, were an undeniable and increasingly menacing reality. The king was borrowing frantically from other European royal houses, leveraging every conceivable asset of his personal fortune, and, most perilously, using larger and larger sums of the Bavarian state budget for his private projects, thereby jeopardizing the financial stability of the Bavarian crown itself. Ministers, at their wits' end, presented him with irrefutable ledgers detailing the impending bankruptcy, only to be met with furious indignation and accusations of disloyalty. The desperate pleas for fiscal responsibility were met with Ludwig's unshakable, almost pathological commitment to his vision, echoing his earlier defiant declaration. The question, once a matter of polite court speculation, transitioned from, "Is the king eccentric?" to, "Is the king truly capable of ruling?" And, more ominously, can Bavaria truly afford this king? The answers to those questions, steeped in desperation and political maneuvering, would soon be delivered with brutal, irreversible finality. By 1886, the situation was no longer merely critical. It was apocalyptic. Ludwig II's personal debts alone soared to an astronomical 14 million marks, a sum that not only threatened to bankrupt the entire Wittelsbach royal house, but also jeopardized the financial stability of the Bavarian state itself. The frantic, desperate letters from creditors, including major European banks, and even the Imperial German government, piled up, each demanding immediate repayment and threatening legal action. Bavaria teetered on the precipice of a full-blown constitutional crisis, its international reputation in tatters. His long-suffering ministers, under the resolute leadership of Prime Minister Johann von Lutz, found themselves staring into an abyss. They could no longer tolerate a sovereign who had completely abdicated his responsibilities, who ignored every urgent plea, who refused all counsel, and whose fantastical architectural whims were actively driving his kingdom into irreversible financial ruin. The delicate machinery of state was grinding to a halt, paralyzed by a king who lived exclusively in a dream. What, then, could be done? What legal or moral recourse existed against a divinely appointed monarch, however lost he might be? The answer as brutal as it was unprecedented, lay in the arcane articles of constitutional law. The only legal path to remove a reigning monarch was to formally declare him mentally unfit to rule. It was a perilous, almost sacrilegious maneuver, but one they believed absolutely essential to save Bavaria from itself. This was no straightforward task. It was a tightrope walk over a chasm of political peril. Despite his escalating reclusiveness and the whispers of madness, Ludwig still retained a deep, almost mythical popularity among the common people of Bavaria. He was their Märchenkönig, their fairy tale king, an embodiment of Bavarian romanticism and a defiant symbol against Prussian hegemony. To depose such a figure required not just political will, but a medical report of seemingly undeniable, irrefutable authority, one that could quell public outcry and legitimize the unthinkable. The man selected to orchestrate this delicate and deeply ethically questionable medical maneuver was Dr. Bernhard von Gudden, a figure of considerable prestige, a renowned psychiatrist, a professor, and the director of the Munich Asylum. His reputation lent an air of scientific gravitas to the proceedings. But here is where the insidious nature of the conspiracy truly began to manifest. Dr. Gudden, the very man who would author the definitive diagnosis, never actually examined King Ludwig II. Let that sink in. His pronouncement of incurable mental illness, specifically a severe form of paranoid schizophrenia, was not the result of clinical observation, face-to-face interviews, or any standard psychiatric evaluation. Instead, his entire diagnosis was constructed upon a foundation of hearsay, meticulously curated witness accounts from discontented, often disgruntled, palace staff, carefully selected reports from ministers whose political futures depended on Ludwig's removal, and an array of historical anecdotes, many of which were likely embellished or misunderstood. This isn't merely a procedural oversight. It's a glaring, monumental red flag for modern medical ethics, suggesting not a purely clinical assessment, but a politically expedient diagnosis, engineered for a predetermined outcome. It was the weaponization of medicine, turning a doctor's authority into an instrument of statecraft. The resulting medical report, delivered with chilling efficiency on June 8, 1886, was a masterpiece of condemnation, a document designed to strip a king of his throne. It meticulously catalogued every perceived eccentricity, every deviation from conventional royal behavior, presenting them as irrefutable evidence of a crumbling mind. His solitary, often elaborate dining rituals, where he used his table, set-yourself mechanism to avoid human contact, were twisted into signs of acute paranoia. His nocturnal activities, once the retreat of an artist king, became proof of a disordered mind shunning reality. His profound obsession with his magnificent castles, his refusal to meet with ministers, his reckless and extravagant spending that defied all fiscal reason, all were laid bare, not as artistic vision or royal prerogative, but as symptoms of a terminal decline. And most insidiously, the report included vaguely worded claims of inappropriate behavior with servants, accusations largely unverified, conveniently vague, and almost certainly exaggerated to further blacken his character and undermine his public image. The report concluded with stark, unequivocal language. Ludwig was suffering from incipient paranoia, a condition that rendered him utterly incapable of exercising his royal prerogatives or governing his kingdom. It asserted, with a cold, detached medical authority, that his continued reign posed an existential threat to Bavaria. What makes this declaration truly damning, a testament to the politically motivated nature of the entire affair, is that it bore the signatures of 4 eminent physicians, including von Gudden, yet not a single one of them had ever conducted a proper, face-to-face psychiatric evaluation of the king. Their diagnosis was made from afar, based on second-hand accounts and political necessity, effectively sentencing Ludwig to dethronement without a trial, without even a conversation. The stage was now set for the final, brutal confrontation. On the morning of June 10th, a royal commission, led by Minister of Justice Johann von Lutz and accompanied by Dr. von Guden, arrived at the majestic gates of Neuschwanstein, the very embodiment of Ludwig's dream world. Their mission, to officially depose the king. Ludwig, cocooned in his fantasy, still clinging fiercely to his belief in divine right and untouchable sovereignty, reacted not with madness, but with furious, righteous indignation. He ordered the loyal local gendarmerie, men who had served his family for generations, to arrest the commission members. And, in an astonishing act of defiance, they did. The architects of his downfall were briefly detained, locked within the very castle they had come to seize. News of the attempted deposition and Ludwig's unexpected resistance spread like wildfire through the surrounding alpine villages. His loyal subjects, the mountaineers and farmers who revered their eccentric king, rallied spontaneously to his side, blocking roads and pledging their allegiance. For a fleeting, desperate moment, it seemed Ludwig might actually defy his ministers, that his people's love could be stirred into a popular uprising capable of overturning the coup. But the fairy tale king was no man of action. His moment of defiance, glorious in its brevity, was not sustained by a will to fight. The very next day, a larger, heavily armed contingent arrived, a stark display of overwhelming state power. This time, Ludwig, perhaps broken by the betrayal, weary of the fight, or finally resigned to the crushing weight of reality, surrendered without a single further word of resistance. The dream was over. He was promptly taken into custody, a monarch stripped of all power, and transported not to one of his magnificent, remote alpine sanctuaries, but to the comparatively modest Berg Castle, nestled on the picturesque shores of Lake Starnberg, south of Munich. As he departed Neuschwanstein, his loyal servants, those who had witnessed his slow descent and cherished his peculiar kindness, openly wept, their tears a poignant testament to the profound finality of his departure. The Mad King of Bavaria, the dreamer who built castles in the clouds, was now nothing more than a prisoner in one of his own lesser palaces, held under the unblinking, constant supervision of the same Dr. Bernhard von Guden, who had diagnosed him sight unseen. The minister's plan was clear, meticulously laid out. Prince Luitpold, Ludwig's uncle, would be installed as regent, effectively taking the reins of government. Ludwig himself would eventually be confined to an asylum, removed permanently from the public eye, a ghost in the Bavarian machinery of state. This was meant to be the quiet, controlled end of a beautiful, tragic reign. But the story of Ludwig II, like the king himself, was destined for a far more dramatic, far more mysterious, and ultimately, far more unsettling conclusion than anyone could have possibly foreseen. His narrative, once a grand opera of fantasy and ambition, was about to take its darkest, most bewildering turn, descending into depths that remain unexplained to this day. The final act of Ludwig II's tragic opera unfolded with bewildering speed, a swift, brutal denouement to a life lived in a dream. Confined at Berg Castle, a structure he had always favored for its idyllic setting by Lake Starnberg, but which now served as his prison, the king was guarded around the clock. His primary overseer was none other than Dr. Bernhard von Guden, the very psychiatrist whose unexamined, politically motivated diagnosis had stripped him of his throne. This arrangement, placing the accuser in direct charge of his captive, was fraught with an inherent conflict of interest that, in retrospect, appears deeply unsettling. Ludwig, surprisingly, seemed to bear his captivity with a strange, almost ethereal calm, perhaps a profound resignation born of exhaustion or a final retreat into his inner world. The grand, theatrical defiance he had shown at Neuschwanstein had vanished, replaced by an unsettling quietude. He spent his days walking in the castle grounds, a pale, increasingly frail figure, occasionally accompanied by the doctor. The official narrative would later claim these walks were part of his therapeutic regimen, designed to bring him back to a grasp of reality. But for a king who had built fantastical palaces and abhorred human contact, these supervised strolls must have felt like a cruel parody of the freedom he had once commanded. On the fateful evening of June 13, 1886, a Sunday, Ludwig and Dr. von Guden went for one such walk by the picturesque yet now foreboding shores of Lake Starnberg. It was a familiar landscape to Ludwig, a place of childhood memories and tranquil retreats. They were expected to return by 8 p.m., a routine known to the castle attendants. They were reportedly seen departing, and later, by a few local villagers strolling along the path near the water's edge. The early evening light must have shimmered on the lake, casting long shadows, lending a deceptively peaceful air to what would become a scene of profound tragedy and enduring mystery. As the appointed hour passed, then the next, an unease began to settle over Berg Castle. When 10 p.m. approached with no sign of the king or his physician, a search party was hastily organized, lanterns cutting through the deepening twilight. The air grew heavy with unspoken fears, a grim premonition that this was no mere delay. At approximately 10:30 p.m., the unspeakable became reality. The bodies of both King Ludwig II and Dr. Bernhard von Guden were discovered, not far from the shore, in the shallow, reedy waters of the lake, at a spot barely deep enough to cover a man's waist. The chilling discovery plunged Bavaria, and indeed all of Europe, into profound shock and intense speculation. A monarch, recently deposed, found dead alongside his own psychiatrist. The implications were immense, the questions immediate and horrifying. The official explanation, swiftly released by the government, was a narrative of tragic madness. It claimed that Ludwig, in a violent fit of his alleged mental illness, had drowned himself and, in the process, drowned Dr. von Guden, who had heroically attempted to save his royal patient. This narrative, however, was riddled with glaring inconsistencies and immediately met with profound skepticism, both from the public and from those close to the royal household. For one, King Ludwig II was renowned as a strong athletic swimmer, having spent countless hours in the lakes and rivers of his beloved Bavaria since childhood. The idea of him drowning in water barely waist deep, so close to shore, defied all logic. Dr. von Guden, too, was known to be a competent swimmer. Beyond this, the scene itself offered damning contradictions. Ludwig's pockets were found to contain his watch and other personal items, seemingly undisturbed by any struggle that might have occurred in the water. More critically, a hurried examination of Dr. von Guden's body revealed clear signs of violence entirely inconsistent with a drowning victim attempting a rescue. Unmistakable marks of strangulation around his neck and a severe blow to the head, suggesting a violent altercation rather than a heroic, self-sacrificing act. Ludwig's own autopsy, conducted with suspicious speed and lack of thoroughness, was less conclusive, but unsettling whispers circulated immediately, alleging that his body bore traces of a bullet wound, strategically placed to avoid immediate detection, but confirming the darkest fears of assassination. The official account felt less like a forensic report and more like a hastily constructed cover story, designed to provide a convenient and immediate explanation for a profoundly inconvenient death. The conspiracy theories proliferated immediately, and with good reason, their tendrils reaching deep into the halls of power, and they have persisted ever since, fueling an enduring royal mystery. Was Ludwig assassinated to prevent him from regaining power, from rallying the formidable public support he still commanded? or from revealing political secrets that could have gravely damaged the regency and stained the reputations of his ministers. His vast debts and intricate dealings with foreign banks and power brokers certainly held potential for scandal. Was Dr. von Guden silenced because he knew too much, perhaps having witnessed the king's murder, or because he had, in a moment of conscience, realized and confessed that his diagnosis was nothing more than a politically motivated fabrication? Some theorize that Ludwig, in a desperate bid for freedom, was trying to escape his captivity and was apprehended by guards, leading to a violent struggle that tragically escalated out of control. Others pointed fingers directly at Prince Luitpold's newly installed regency faction, suggesting they had the strongest motive to permanently remove the deposed monarch, eliminating any chance of a tumultuous return to power and securing their own precarious grip on the Bavarian state. The possibilities were endless, the answers, infuriatingly, absent. Over the decades, various theories have been proposed, meticulously debated by historians and armchair detectives alike, but no definitive, irrefutable evidence has ever surfaced to fully explain the precise circumstances of their deaths. The Bavarian government, under the urgent demands of political stability, quickly sealed the details of the investigation, burying the official records and actively discouraging any further inquiry or public discussion. The immediate declaration of accidental drowning, despite its glaring flaws, served the paramount political need for a swift, seemingly unquestionable resolution. This allowed Prince Luitpold to assume the regency without further challenges or destabilizing public outcry, effectively drawing a curtain over the entire sordid affair. The Mad King's life, a beautiful tragedy steeped in romantic fantasy, ended not with a grand operatic flourish or a dramatic last stand, but in the murky, unexplained depths of a Bavarian lake. It left behind an enduring legend and an unsolved royal mystery that still captivates historians and enthusiasts to this day, an enigmatic coda to an extraordinary reign. His magnificent castles, once private sanctuaries for his troubled soul, now stand as his most profound and public epitaphs, silent, brooding witnesses to a king who dared to live a dream, even as it cost him his throne, his sanity, and ultimately, his life. Ludwig II's legacy is a complex tapestry woven from tragedy, romance, and an almost unparalleled artistic vision. He is remembered not for his statecraft, but for his dreamscapes, the castles that defied logic and financial prudence, yet became enduring symbols of Bavaria. Neuschwanstein, in particular, transcended its origins as a private retreat to become a global icon, inspiring Walt Disney's Sleeping Beauty castle and cementing its place in popular imagination as the quintessential fairy tale fortress. Yet, these beautiful structures are also monuments to an unfulfilled reign, to a king who found the weight of the crown too heavy and the realities of governance too dull. His story raises profound questions about the nature of sanity, the responsibilities of leadership, and the limits of individual eccentricity within a political system. Was Ludwig truly mad in the clinical sense, or was his madness a convenient diagnosis for ministers seeking to remove a financially irresponsible and politically inconvenient monarch? The political motivations behind his deposition are undeniable, casting a long shadow of doubt over the medical verdict. Ludwig's life, a vibrant splash of color against the drab canvas of late 19th century realpolitik, continues to fascinate. He represents the ultimate romantic idealist, a man who refused to compromise his artistic soul for the demands of the material world. His retreat into a nocturnal, castle-building existence can be seen as either a tragic escape from unbearable pressures or a self-indulgent abandonment of duty, depending on one's perspective. The enduring mystery of his death only adds to his allure, transforming him from a historical figure into a mythological one, a tragic hero whose end remains shrouded in the very mists that often surrounded his beloved castles. The Mad King of Bavaria became a symbol of resistance against the mundane, a monarch who dared to prioritize beauty and art over power and politics. His legacy challenges us to look beyond simplistic labels of madness or sanity, and to appreciate the intricate interplay of personality, power, and historical circumstance that shaped the extraordinary life and enigmatic death of King Ludwig II. His castles stand as physical manifestations of his inner world, inviting millions to step, however briefly, into the beautiful insanity that was his reign. The story of Ludwig II, the fairy tale king, reminds us that history is rarely as neat or as simple as textbooks suggest. Behind the official narratives often lie profound human dramas, unresolved mysteries, and the unsettling truth that power can twist both perception and reality. Ludwig's beautiful insanity, whether a true affliction or a political convenience, ultimately cost him everything, but gifted the world an architectural legacy unlike any other. What do you believe truly happened on the shores of Lake Starnberg? Was it suicide, murder, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts below. Hit that subscribe button to keep these historical enigmas alive. And join me next time as we plunge into another forgotten corner where truth and legend intertwine. Stay curious, and remember, the most captivating stories are often the ones they tried to bury.